What's up, everybody? Well, I have a quick moment to make my first video. Welcome back. I'm back to where I normally am and would like to be 365 and a quarter days a year. Would much rather be here than the other place that I was at. But that's another story. Glad to be back. And I don't know how long this opportunity is. So I need to unbox this new hoard. And a lot of it is, I found out I was saying it wrong. It's Temu, T-E-M-U, like Tim University, T-E-M-U, and not Temu. I have a lot of stuff from Temu that I've ordered, both had sent to my mom's house and had sent over here. It's a long story. Needed a sink drain. I ordered one from Walmart, didn't think it would ever come in, and so reordered the exact same product from Temu. Was very angry and very disappointed. It's one of those pop-up sink drains. And ordered two products and neither one of them work, so I'm in the process of getting refunded. So, you know, what I want to title this video, I think I'm going to do some unboxing and say, I want to title this video, you know, I've been thinking of some interesting titles to talk about. And I want to title it once again, you know, it's like I get stuck on subjects and keep remaking videos. I think 2 years ago, I talked about how, you know, I hate traveling, and every time I go to my mom's house, I'm reminded of that fact. It's not that I don't want to see her, okay? Do not get me wrong. Oh, and I got some new shades while I was over there. It's not that I don't want to be with her. It's not that, it's never been the case. You know, it's always, I feel like traveling brings out the absolute worst, the absolute worst side of me. Because if you know anything about me, you know, I have mental issues. You know, I've been diagnosed with autism, but most people, well, it wasn't until I was about, 28 years old or something like that. Most people just thought of me as attention deficit and OCD prior to that diagnosis, because I don't fit the typical profile of an autistic boy who never learns to talk and wouldn't mind wearing diapers for the rest of his life if he doesn't. Okay? Well, I, on the other hand, only buy diapers for my dolls on Temu. And that's a long story too. Well, so, you know, if you know anything about people like me, you know, with mental disorders, whether it's attention deficit, autism, both, you know, OCD, whatever the hell you call what I have, anxiety disorders, you know, various disorders. Mild case of arthrid, you know, where I don't like most foods. You know, people like me just thrive on routine. You know, routine is what I want. Whatever that routine is, not really the most important thing in the world, just so that it stays the same. You know, just like with the potty training thing. You know, I was not difficult to potty train, was not an older kid wearing diapers. I know I'm freaking obsessed with diapers. Was about a similar age, you know, when I was day trained as my little sister, except she had the bedwetting issues, and that's another story too. Around 2.5 was a normal age. Well, what started off difficult, according to my mom, I mean, she only thought we were difficult because she never had a son, became just a piece of cake once I got the hang of it. And as you know, I don't even fart in my clothing. You cannot even pay me enough to fart in my clothing. So once it became my routine, you know, it didn't really matter which routine it was. You know, once it became a routine, it was golden, you know, most important thing in the world, most important part of my identity. It was well carved with toilet symbol in my headstone. But, you know, that's just the way that it is. It's like once something is a routine, same thing with school. You know, I would always get severe anxiety and depression, you know, when leaving behind, well, really any grade level. My least favorite time of year to stay before is May, you know, roughly the couple months leading up to my birthday in June. And would always like cry myself to sleep for a month toward the end of the school year, and a little bit, you know, before the first day of the new grade. But just, you know, the whole thought of entering grade X+1 was just terrifying to me. Okay, but then as I'd get to the new grade or the new school, then it would become my new normal. It would become just my new reality. No longer something scary to be feared, just my new school, and then just my school. So it was always terrifying. Never, ever, ever saying, man, I can't wait to grow up and be like that older kid over there. I want to get older. Hell to the effing no. Because I never had older kids that I looked up to. Other kids would not freely associate with me, least of all older kids. I was always around younger kids, including my little sister. So, new things were always terrifying. Never wanted to try new things, no matter how fun they may have been. Was never the kid saying, I want to get my license the very moment I turn 16. I want to go out and do this as soon as I possibly can. Never. Hell no. Was always, at some level clinging on to who I had been a year before. And just keep making videos about the same familiar topics. So I've just always thrived on routine. I've thrived on things being the way that they've always been. And, once I get into something new, such as potty training at 2.5, such as kindergarten at 6.5, when most kids would have been entering first grade, such as middle school, 6th grade at 12.5, when most kids in my class were 11.5, with my birth date, such as high school when I was 15.5 instead of 14.5, and college when I was 19.5 instead of 18.5, and so on. No matter what it was, it's like once I got there, once I got to the stage, it was okay. I was good to go. But, the process of starting a new book, books always became easy as I read past chapter 2. But chapter 1, that first step, was the hardest one to make. That first page was the hardest one to read. And it's just always been like that. And I really just hate traveling. I detest travel with every fiber of my being. I detest it. It's not that I don't want to be with my mom. It's not that I don't want to be anywhere, that I've ever traveled to. But it's just the, let's get out and go to this place. Hell to the F no. That is not what I want to do. You could hand me $1 million freaking dollars right now. $1 million. And not a dime of it would ever be spent on traveling. Certainly not outside the U.S., and probably not even outside the 2 states that I can accurately color on a map to say I remember being there. One of them is Texas, for the majority of my life. My favorite big state that I'm proud of having lived in for over 30 years. The other one is a smaller state that I'm in right now that's one of the few shaped like its first initial. That's all I can really tell you. It is a southern state, a lot like Texas, and it is somewhat shaped like its first initial. You could draw a picture of the state and write the other remaining letters in its name after it. And that would be pretty accurate. So you can probably guess what it is. So yeah, traveling is just not my thing. It's not something I would ever want to spend my money on. And I just feel such a burning hatred, for people that, it's awesome that they don't want to have kids. I don't want to have any kids. And then they follow up with, I'd like to travel the world. I don't want to have kids because I want to travel the world. Well, it's like, that ruins it. That would defeat the whole purpose. Because in my case, my purpose for not wanting kids, or my reason for not wanting kids, is everything to do with the changes that it makes to your body, not only during pregnancy and childbirth, but also for the rest of your freaking life. I don't want the increase in colds. I don't want, to have to deal with bodily fluids that will expose me to germs. I don't want to lose sleep. Sleep deprivation is another thing. I don't want to do things that are going to increase my chances of getting a cold and decrease my chances of getting sleep. And, I just don't have it. Yeah. And luckily I don't have a uterus, praise God, anymore. But, it's just another one of the many things that I would not, want to throw myself into. I don't get why, so many people just threw themselves into it, no matter what it was going to bring into their lives, no matter what changes, for the better, the worse, the whatever, they just went ahead and had kids, while they could. And I will never understand that, because it's like, why? Why is my level of trepidation and, avoidance of it, and structuring my whole life around not having kids and not having extra colds, why is that so uncommon? You would think it would be the rule, not the exception. Why don't other women plan their whole lives around having as few colds as humanly possible? I mean, aren't they supposed to be the cleaner gender? Aren't men the disgusting ones in every way? Why don't more women, just structure their whole freaking lives, from not having friends, to not dating anyone, to not having kids, to not going to church, to not, going out and doing things, to not traveling, So, I just would like to know. I would like to know, like I stated before, and I know I don't have a cold right now. I've just kind of woke up a little bit with a frog in my throat, as I always state. And all those years of, I think, damaging my voice in an effort to make it sound lower is kind of catching up to me at this stage in my life. When menopause is probably changing it a little bit into an old lady voice instead of the man's voice that I would want to have. But yeah, it's like I've just always freaking wondered, why am I alone? Why am I the only one, who has just devoted my whole entire life, to avoiding things that I don't want to do, such as, having extra colds, such as, just everything. Why are other women not like me? It's not, why am I this weirdo, that doesn't want to date and marry and have kids and travel? It's just like, why are other people different, is what I've always asked. And why do other people think it's okay to have freaking however many colds, their kids expose them to that they haven't already had in the past? Freaking 2 to 4 colds a year, that's ridiculous. That'd be like going back in time, and I don't want to do that. That would be like going back to a dark place in my life for me. To have 2 to 4 colds a year instead of always 1 or less consistently. Why are other people okay, with having colds, in order to bring kids into the world? Why are other people okay with having traveler's diarrhea, which is probably about the worst thing I could ever possibly imagine, as stated before? As I've talked about many times, the worst thing that could ever happen is vomiting and or messing yourself, but especially messing. Because it chips away at my identity of being in control and strong. You know what I'm saying? My whole identity that was formed when I was potty trained and finally good enough for my mom and her mom and so on. When I finally was good enough for everyone because I was using the toilet properly before I was 3 years old, and the thought of having anything to threaten that, any food that I find upsets my stomach just a little bit is something I never want to touch again, ever. I don't care what it tastes like. If I think it's upsetting my stomach, I never want to touch it again, because that chips away at, my sense of control over, my own freaking body, over, the most important thing, most fundamentally basic thing I learned, most important thing I ever learned. And so, yeah, it's like, why are other people okay, with that, with the vulnerability that is caused by such things, having children, traveling the world, they never know what's going to happen. I mean, sure, they could just go out and have a lot of fun, but sure, a lot of bad stuff could happen too. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I know bad stuff can happen anywhere. It can happen in your own backyard. But I mean, yeah, going to a foreign country when, it's hard enough, to know what to order from a restaurant down the street. It's hard enough for me to pick safe foods, off of a restaurant where I understand the language. And, I've ordered there many times before, you know, and it's hard enough to know what to cook for yourself. Oh well, I mean, it's not that hard. Um, to stick with the tried and true and always cook it the same way. Um, why would I want to go throw myself in some stupid foreign country, even if it was a so-called white country per se, where they speak English and they have skin tones similar to mine, like in Europe, like the UK, like France, like Germany, where they've pretty much adopted English. Why would I want to put myself in some unfamiliar situation like that? You know what I'm saying? Um, why would I want to go experience weather that I'm not used to having? Such as going on these ski trips that so many people like in Colorado when they don't live in Colorado or up north. They live in the south, but then they go skiing in Colorado. But that's just big shots. I guess that's something that, I guess the silver lining of poverty is that it has protected me from such experiences. You know what I'm saying? The fact that I can't afford $100 clothing that you would need to do that. And I don't have those opportunities in my life. That allows freaking Timu to feel like I'm rich and to feel actually special and wonderful. I'm happy about the little things because I don't have the big things. So, yeah, I just will never understand the travel bug, or whatever it's called. These people that they want to travel. They'll go somewhere for Thanksgiving. They'll go another place for Christmas. They'll go another place in March for spring break. They'll go many places over the summer and so on. Every chance they get, they're in a plane or they're, traveling across the U.S., backpacking here, skiing there, doing this, doing that. And I'll never understand the appeal. I will never understand. And I'm glad I will never understand. I've never even been camping out in the woods. It's not something I ever wanted to do. A lot of people wanted me to have that experience, but I just never took them up on it. Because why would I want to take a crap in the woods when I've got a perfectly good toilet and some toilet paper? And my whole identity, my whole pride and self-worth is contingent upon doing that 100% perfectly, if you know what I mean. Why would I want to go somewhere that would jeopardize that? So, anyway, enough about the traveling and how I hate traveling. I don't respect people who, make that their whole purpose of existence and act like they're better than people who never stepped out of their own backyard, basically. They think they're better than homebodies and patriotic backwoods type Southerners that are just American made, American proud. They think they're better than us. People who just don't care if we, live to be 100 and never see the seven wonders, like that Jessica Andrews song that I used to like when she was like maybe 1 year older than me at the time or something. Yeah, I love that song, but she didn't make too many songs after that. But yeah, it just resonated so much with me that, if I live to be 100 and I never see much of the world, I'm going to be just fine. So anyway, I ordered a lot of things on Temu that I'm probably not going to get to. One thing I've always wanted was a Buddy doll. And I wanted the blonde version. And I also have the kid sister. Maybe I'll unbox her in another video. But the blonde Buddy from eBay. I've always wanted a Buddy because this 1980s style house just reminds me of the days when dolls like this were popular. I've always thought the boy should be as blonde as the girl. I've always hated this trope that dark hair looks better on males than females because that's like saying I'm automatically masculine for not being blondes, which only a small minority of a small minority of a small minority are. I think the boy should be just as blonde as a girl. And the most exciting thing that I got from Temu, see this, I want to show. I would have to put it dark for you to see it, but it's a projector. And as you can see, it casts a full moon onto the ceiling or the wall. And I'm just putting one on Buddy, instead of turning off the lights, but it looks identical to the full moon. so that if we have a cloudy day, I can film that and say, look at the moon. See, that's the kind of thing that impresses me, because I've never been to France or the UK or, honestly. Oh, and I had to condition his hair. It was kind of in a mess, and wash his clothes. Honestly, what is so great? You know what? So you can see the moon, which looks the same across the world. So you can see the moon in another country. So you can see the same stars in another country. What is so great about that? I will never understand. Another thing I ordered, as I've shown before, the diapers. That's a long story. I wanted some diapers because I actually had some dolls that were wearing actual baby Pampers. But you see, the nature of babies' diapers is they're meant to be disposable. So guess what they don't do? Last very long. And so they fall apart. And I bought those thinking I could, use those. I already have some, reusable diapers that are working just fine on them. But I don't know. Those look a little bigger than I was expecting, but I'm okay with it. Honestly, I won't get to all this stuff. Another doll that I have, and had to recondition her hair, was a little bitty Little Mermaid Ariel, 4 inches, that came with this Blossom doll. And what's special about Blossom, I had to put that skirt, that came from Temu. She didn't have a skirt. She just had purple panties painted on. Many years ago, I bought a Joey Russo doll, not knowing who he was. He's like a Kevin doll with dark hair. Well, Blossom was a show in the 90s that I didn't watch. And so, now I have the girl, Blossom, the main character, and Joey was her twin brother, so I have to show him. So, Joey Russo and Blossom Russo dolls. And I'll put them together one day. So that is why I got this doll. She had some badly tangled dolls that needed TLC. And other things I got on Temu. These dolls were nude. Some of them were decapitated. What was that noise? I wanted a Ken with a beard. And this is a dark guy. So I put clothes that I bought.